Still sitting in a truck seat that's older than your favorite pair of work boots? Your back has been filing complaints for years. If your seat is worn out, sagging, or just plain uncomfortable, it's time for an upgrade. Head on over to seatspecialist.com. Check out their selection of quality replacement seats built to keep you comfortable mile after mile. And don't forget to use promo code TR10 4U to save 10% on your order. Seatspecialist.com, because a better ride starts with a better seat.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of That's Delivered, your go-to podcast for all things trucking and transportation. I'm your host, Ray, and today we have a special guest joining us. It's Mike, the CEO of Stagecoach Storage. Stagecoach Storage provides essential storage solutions for truck drivers and other large vehicle owners. We'll be discussing why the company likes Stagecoach Storage are so important to drivers and how they got started, and much more. So let's dive right in. Mike, just wanted to see how you're doing and glad to have you on board. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how your day's going.
Yeah, it's going great. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, I appreciate it. A little bit about myself, I guess, background. I didn't start in the trucking world. This Stagecoach Storage, to be honest, was in an odd way to say it, I say is almost an accident. Like so many businesses, we actually are up in Minnesota, is where our headquarters is, and we had a business completely unrelated to trucking, but we happened to have several acres beside our business that was really unused area. And years ago, gosh, we're talking 10 years ago now, several times a trucker came into that office and said, "Gosh, hey, I need a place to park. Can I use that open space you got?" And we repeatedly said, "No, no, no, no. We're going to use that for something else," and just didn't really think anything of it. And it kept happening more and more to the point where we said, well, we're not using that space. Why don't we let these guys park out there? And we let that first guy park out there and didn't think too much of it. And before you knew it, we had 50, 60, 70 trucks. He told his friends, hey, he found a place to park, and in the Twin City area where that office is and where our headquarters is, there's just a huge restriction and lack of space for those with large commercial vehicles. The city has a lot of restrictions on just parking them next to your house, if you don't have adequate space. And there's just not a lot of area with our density here of population and land to where these guys were driving 30, 40, 50 miles out of the city to find a place to park long term. They, like drivers, completely understand, you can park at a truck stop and that for a day or two, but a lot of the clientele that we cater to, is maybe they're gone for a week and they're home for a couple days, or maybe they're home for a week at a time, and those solutions really weren't working for them. So they were always searching for a place to put their vehicle while they weren't on the road. And like I say, we kind of accidentally fell into that. But then as we talked to those drivers more and more, they kept telling us, we've got more friends and we have no place to put vehicles. So it kind of became the birth of what Stagecoach Storage is now. So in an effort to try to help them, we opened a second location specific, it wasn't just a side lot, but we opened another location that was specific for this purpose. And that location had room for 150 trucks. And, it was literally months and that was full.
Wow.
And we've now got 6 locations throughout the Midwest. And, each time it's been a very, very similar story of, once the properties are ready to go, there's just such a shortage of area for these guys to store their vehicles that they're searching for it. So we're constantly trying to find more locations and find areas that need the service and expand our business and provide that service to that industry.
Man, that's huge. I mean, think about you having a big rig like that and there's nowhere to put it. I mean, man, those rigs aren't cheap, and you want to kind of put them in a place where you're going to feel a little safe and not like it's going to get damaged. That's huge. So I looked at your
Well,
website
yeah, that's a
and
great point. One
yeah,
of our important factors we found at the first location, there was no fences, no gates, no anything. And we didn't have many, but there was an occasions that, batteries were taken or something, people were just coming in, seeing all these trucks and helping themselves, if you will, which
Mhm.
was a huge problem throughout the trucking industry. So on all of our future properties, they're fully gated, they're fully secure, security cameras, and even our properties, usually around half the spots in our properties have power. Because here in Minnesota, it's staying cold in the winter,
Yeah.
and those big trucks don't like to start. So we wanted to provide a plug-in so that the block heaters could be powered for those trucks, so that way they didn't have to think about burning fuel all night and leave their trucks running. But yet, when they came in the morning or whenever they came back to grab their truck, that they wouldn't have a problem getting it going.
Mhm. If it gels up, I mean, that could be really expensive. I mean,
Yeah,
man,
yeah,
so that's
it's
huge. Yeah, I look at the website and everything looks really clean. You got a nice video to show where it's going to be, and I mean, man, this you guys are putting in the work. I mean, that's so.
we're
Were
trying.
you? Yeah, were you a truck driver or did you
I
have a
wasn't.
background?
I wasn't. I came actually from a financial background. So I was a financial planner and in the accounting world for many years. So I'm almost the opposite of a stereotypical guy in a truck. But at the same time, I recognize the need that these truckers had, and we constantly survey our clients and say, what more can we do? What do you need? And that was what brought out, these guys need power over the winter because they're, burning through fuel just to keep their trucks running. They need security, if can't afford to have that truck not be ready to go and have surprises when they come back to their truck.
Yeah,
Uh, every time we turn around, a lot in our initial lots were gravel lots, which were fine. But then our newer lots now are paved or concrete, because the guys don't want to, if it rains overnight, they don't want to be walking through mud as they're doing their inspections. So we try to listen to the drivers that are working with us, and as we expand, take into consideration their needs and their wants, and make it as attractive as a property as it can be.
yeah. I totally hear that. It resonates. That you actually care. You're not just saying, "Hey, I'll take your money." You're actually giving them a good experience to help them ease their load, so to speak, when they're out there trucking. So,
Yeah,
how
yeah. I
nice.
mean, everybody's got problems to deal with fuel prices and insurance and all the headaches, that are in the industry. We try to at least make them comfortable in their home and they can relax and not worry about things.
That's awesome. Hey, man, that's great. Was there any experiences that inspired you to start thinking about solutions that eventually led to Stagecoach Storage? Because, I mentioned the financial world. I mean, you probably can work the numbers to make a lot of things work. So I was thinking, is there any experiences you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, it's just gosh, it comes down to, I pay a lot of attention to politics as well. And, in the Twin Cities area of Minnesota, I kept seeing that our state was, and cities that we service were putting more and more restrictions on guys being able to park on the streets. Somewhere, I think it was maybe 2018, 2019, the city of St. Paul, where our original location was started towing guys off the streets. They put a law in place that said commercial vehicles cannot be stored overnight on the street. So even if you were, at the end of a cul-de-sac and had a quiet corner and you could leave your truck there near your house, they were towing trucks and they were charging them, in the city of Minneapolis, city of St. Paul, it was like $1,500 to pick up your truck.
Wow.
You had to pay the towing fee and that. So it's interesting that everyone considers trucking the backbone of America. But then when you get into politics, at the same time, they're saying, well, we need this backbone, but we don't want you in our neighborhood. It's like, hold it. You can't have it both ways. We need materials to move around. We need this trucking industry to keep everything moving along. But we don't want the trucks on our streets. So
Yeah.
it's contradicting one another. So we saw a huge need, and that's why we're trying to expand our business just to assist these guys, because we get calls every day that even they parked at one of the big truck stops, but they were there for 3 days when they were only supposed to be there for two, and they got towed. And it's over $1,000 for them to pick up their truck because it got towed to an impound lot, and it's just terrible.
And the load's late, or maybe even something gets damaged while they're being transported here and there.
Yeah,
Wow, man, that's huge. Oh man, I thank you and applaud the work you're putting in there. That definitely is a turning point. You took the bull by the horns and the private sector to take care of what the public sector was refusing. So
Yeah, and it's interesting. I guess I'm not here to bash on government or politics, but at the same time, in the state of Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, around our area in the Midwest, we hear all the time the state, kind of gets up and says, "Gosh, we're helping truckers out. We put in, 15 truck stops and put in wayside rests and these kind of things where people can stop, but they're not long-term parking, and they'll spend 10, $15 million for a place for 50 trucks to park. It's like those are our tax dollars being used completely inefficiently. And, 90% of the time those are full. So, the 51st guy that tries to get to that property doesn't have a place to go.
Wow.
So it's terrible to see in the industry that you have all these upfront costs to buy these vehicles. You're trying to do what you can to, be an independent trucker and make a living for your family, but the government and all the different aspects are trying to put roadblocks in front of you. So we're hoping that with our service, that we can try to relieve some of that stress.
Man, I champion that. That's huge. A lot of truckers feel like they're alone, and it's good to have a friend when they need it, especially when they're trying to sleep. Um, that is something that they can do. They can sleep there too.
In some cases, it's interesting. Every one of our properties has a little bit different rules, partially because we have to get city approval when we build these properties. And every city kind of has their own choice on what they will and won't let us do. In many of our lots, it's certainly no issue. The guys can stay. We're not transfer stations, or anything of that nature. So our facilities are not such that you're loading, unloading your trucks or moving between trucks. They're just places to keep your vehicles. But some of our locations, the cities do not allow anyone to stay overnight. But really, our clientele, for the most part, our locations are within reasonable distance of their homes. In most cases, our clients are, bringing their personal car, so they get an assigned spot. So let's say they're in spot, 102, whatever. That spot is theirs, and nobody else touches that spot but them. So what most of our guys do is they take their personal car home, uh, for the evening, for the weekend, whenever they're in town. And then when they come back, they pull their truck out, put their personal car back in that spot. So they always have a vehicle within our spot, and they're just swapping back and forth because obviously it's easy to park your Chevy truck or whatever at home, but you can't park your 70-foot rig there. So
Wow.
in most of our clients are live within a reasonable distance of our properties, and they're just swapping out between their personal vehicles and their commercial vehicles when they're using our spots.
Nice. So, just for our listeners who is familiar with a lot of the Stagecoach storage, could you give an overview of basically the future, what it's going to look like, or what they can expect?
Our goal is to continue to open new properties as we see, locations throughout the Midwest that have a demand for this. So we're constantly surveying our existing clients and asking them, what they need, where do they need space, how much space do they need? Because for example, this fall we're opening a new property in the Twin City area, and we anticipate actually that'll be full within 60 to 90 days. That we'll
Wow.
get the word out that we'll have so many trucks available, and a lot of our existing clients have more trucks than we even have space for. So we get calls every day of people looking for space, and most of our properties are full, so we just can't accommodate them. So we're trying to open additional properties so we can make space for their needs. And then we're also looking at different areas. We started in the Twin Cities, and we have several properties here in Twin Cities of Minnesota. Last 2 years ago, we opened up down in Des Moines, Iowa. We even went north up into St. Cloud, Minnesota. We've looked all different directions, but our intention in the short run is, to stay in the Midwest and keep servicing these areas and
Is it hard
continuing.
to find land? Is it hard to make those turnarounds from maybe a field of dirt that wasn't zoned right or anything like that? How does it get difficult? What's the challenges with that?
Well, I'll say yes. I mean, it's difficult. So, to put that in context, it's relatively easy to find land in high demand areas, right, where they're populated and where there's a need. What we found very difficult is actually getting city approval, city, county, state approval to build it.
Mm.
Just as I was describing earlier, we've dealt with a number of cities on the southern side of the Twin Cities of Minnesota here, where we found land that'd be perfect to open a property like this, and the city did not want to see 150, semis coming through their city, so they would not let us build. So, this use is not typical. Like you think of as you're driving around anywhere, you see these mini storages going up everywhere, right? Where you
Yeah.
rent 10 by 10 box for, $150 a month, whatever it is. Those are very typical uses. They've been around for years and years, and the cities are used to that development.
Oh,
Where our concept of development for truck storage is unusual, and a lot of cities have restrictions that just won't let it happen. Because most outdoor storage has to be a secondary use to an office or to a distribution center or to a warehouse, whereas our use is exclusively the outdoor parking. And when you go into city codes, county codes, they don't have an approved use to allow that. So we have to go through an extensive process whenever we develop a new property to explain what we're doing, explain the need, explain the demand, and get them to authorize us to allow it. And we've had dozens and dozens of cases where we wanted to build properties, and the municipality, the city, the county, whoever oversees that piece of land says, we don't want it.
man,
And we can't move.
you're breaking down walls. That's a
Well,
lot of hard work, man.
I'll tell you, we'd like to break down a lot more, but in many cases, it's not the difficulty of finding the land of where there's a need. It's the government regulations that have put the biggest restriction on us and made it very difficult for us to develop properties when, their concern is, you have an 80,000 pound truck and 150 of those coming into a single property. It's a lot of wear and tear on the roads. It's a
Mhm.
lot of extra traffic. It's a lot of that makes the average person on a city council or on a county board just concerned. And
I cringe a little bit because
yeah,
what about snow removal? I mean, that's
oh,
huge in the Midwest. It's like, man, you got to get the trucks
well,
in and out of there. I mean, how does that work for you guys?
that's part of the restriction we have because depending on the layout of the property, we have a property in Burnsville, Minnesota, just as an example, where the drive lanes are actually 1,000 feet long, and we want to maximize how many trucks can fit in that area. But this past year we didn't have a whole heck of a lot of snow. It was pretty nice. But 2 years ago we just got pounded. We had almost double the amount of average snow up here in Minnesota, and it was a nightmare. Try to push a couple inches of snow 1,000 feet. That takes a pretty powerful truck. That's not just a pickup truck with a blade like you would think of when you think of clearing snow. This takes massive equipment, and it's difficult. And in Minnesota, it's very unpredictable. We may have 30 inches of snow in a year, or we may have 100 inches of snow in a year. So, depending on what we're dealing with, and that creates a lot of headache for our drivers, because if all of a sudden overnight we get 10 inches of snow, that's not easy, especially for an empty truck. These trucks require some weight on the wheels to push through the snow. So if a guy comes in empty, has nothing in his trailer, it's tough to get traction on the slippery surfaces. So
Uh,
it's a constant battle for us to stay on top of that and make sure that any driver can come in no matter what the weather condition is and get in and out safely.
do you
So
guys do that yourself or do you hire it out? Is there a company that takes care of you or you guys facilitate it yourself?
yeah, no, it's a combination. Depending on the location, we do have some equipment ourselves and we do contract out the work. So it depends on how big and the style of location and that. But we do have our own internal maintenance staff that goes through the properties on nearly a daily basis to make sure that everything's looking right and that there's no surprises. But when it comes to snow, when you're dealing with that many properties, I don't have the manpower and the equipment to do them all, and especially
Right.
if it snows on all 6 properties, that all needs to be done within a couple hours, and it takes a lot of manpower. So we do contract a lot of that work out, but certainly it's so much more than just a parking lot. There's a lot of logistical issues to stay on top of keeping these lots, adequate for our drivers.
Wow, man. I mean, man, starting a business in itself can be challenging, but then when you start breaking down all those different facets of expertise that you have to learn and pick up and run and make the best of it because you never know what the hurdle is and how big it is. I mean, that's huge. and you guys
No,
aren't giving up. You're pushing ahead. I mean, man,
we're trying, I
yeah.
mean, that 2 years ago when we had all that snow, I guarantee we had a lot of drivers that weren't real happy about it. But we're fighting with Mother Nature, so we'd love to have everything happen instantly, but manpower and equipment don't always allow that. So we appreciate our drivers are very patient with us, but at the same time, we got to deal with whatever Mother Nature throws at us.
Nice. Well, so there's been a lot of rise in theft and vandalism. You mentioned that before. What are some things that drivers can do to also help you with the storage for the place? Things like,
Yeah.
is there any extra things that they could probably do themselves?
We've been extremely fortunate that on our properties, with the exception of that first one I described, all of them are gated, fenced, secure, and we have extensive security cameras throughout the property. So we're constantly monitoring the properties. We've had no issues whatsoever on theft and vandalism in those properties. So
Very
we keep
nice.
a very close eye. Every one of our drivers is given a code to open the gate. So when they pull up to our property, they have a keypad, they enter their code, and it opens up the gate so they can come in, and it closes quick behind them. So on the properties that are fully gated and secure, we've had no issues. Obviously we do reach out to our drivers and say, if anything doesn't look right, let us know, because we can pull up the cameras, we can see what's going on, make sure that the wrong person isn't in the property. But, these guys, they have a lot of respect for what they do and respect for what the next guy does next to them. So we don't really have any concern about, one driver bothering another driver's truck. They know they don't want to have their truck messed with, and they don't want to mess with the next guy's truck.
No,
It's we got to keep out everybody else who shouldn't be there, and the gates and the security systems that we have done a great job with that, and we've had no issue. But we know at truck stops, we know at unsecure facilities, that's a major issue. We've been very fortunate to the steps we put in place have prevented all of that.
So, any feedback or stories from customers that have benefited from your facilities, your locations, that have really made an impact on them?
Yeah, I think, like I say, our core guy is the independent operator. The vast majority of our drivers have one truck. It's one guy, one truck, and they're making it happen. Although, we get feedback from those guys saying, "Hey, I can buy another truck. I can find a driver. I know that I can call you up, and within 30 days, I can add another parking spot." So I've got a place where I can keep that vehicle. It's inexpensive every month, and I can expand my business without worrying about what do I do with my truck. So we get a lot of feedback from guys that are trying to build their business, increase trucks, increase drivers, and if you have a fleet of say 5 trucks, you've got various drivers. Often those drivers are turning over. Sometimes you got good drivers, sometimes you hire a guy and he's not so good, and you gotta find a new guy. It's nice because we can give a different security code to every person that comes through our gate. So if all of a sudden, one of our business owners says, "Hey, I got to get rid of Joe. He just isn't a good guy, and I'm a little worried about him," he can call us up, and I can instantly turn off his code, so that guy no longer has access to our property. And so we're seeing the small fleets, the guys that have 5, 10 trucks that really appreciate the security, really appreciate that they can expand their fleet without having to worry about where am I going to put that truck. And it's an advantage for them hiring as well, because they know, their driver can just bring their personal car in, grab the truck, leave their personal car there. There's no questions or concerns, and we're close to highways, easy in and out. So that's, I'd say, the biggest testimonial we get is just the security and transparency we have. We're constantly asking our drivers, what more can we do to make this work for you, and then implementing those recommendations.
Okay, man, that's huge. I mean, because you always see the solo truck driver, and you wonder how do they do it, and it takes a community, and you're part of that resource, man. That's huge. And
Yeah, no, it's
wow.
been great. And I just really enjoy, I'm out in the lots practically every day, just saying hi to guys out there and checking out lots. And it's fun to chat with them and see what's going on in the world. And, we're always seeing, the load rates dropping and, up and down as we've had the economy change. We're seeing fuel prices up and down. And, it's a tough world out there. But at the same time, if you can do it efficiently and you can make it work and make a very nice living in this business.
That's awesome. I mean, man, you see the big picture. That's great. Just to give you the floor now, are there any additional points about Stagecoach Storage that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Gosh, I guess I didn't prepare well enough here.
It's an open mic.
We certainly, appreciate the small business owner. I mean, obviously, you talk about Swift and some of these other big companies. They're great and they're the competition to most of our clients, right? But there's always going to be a need for what the independent operator provides out there that the big companies can't. And we certainly have more demand than we have trucks out there, and we hear about that for years. And, like you said, you really need a team. You need a good insurance agent. You need a place to store that vehicle. You need to be in and out and as efficient as possible. And we try to do everything we can to at least satisfy one piece of that puzzle and hopefully make life a little easier for these guys. They got enough problems to deal with.
Man, so it'd be kind of cool if you can get a insurance discount, knowing that they have someone like you. Say, hey, I got a secure facility. You don't have to worry about claims. That would go
That's,
hand in hand. That would
yeah.
be pretty slick, wouldn't
Yeah, I mean, we certainly don't provide insurance, but at the same time,
it?
we've
Yeah.
never pursued some, I'll call it accreditation or some certification or something. It
Mhm.
would be interesting to think about if there was a way that somebody could get a discount because they've got a good place to store their vehicle.
Mhm. That would incentivize the whole in the right direction there, versus say I gotta save pinch pennies and try to get around this or get around that. So, man, wow, I appreciate it, Mike. You've opened my eyes up to the whole storage community. I mean, man, that's huge. Is there a way that people can get a hold of you guys? What's the best way to reach out and know a little more about Stagecoach Storage on their own?
Yeah. Probably the best way is check out our website, stagecoachstorage.com. Our phone numbers are on there. We actually also have the ability for people to rent space right through our website. So they can go in and see each of our facilities, see what's available. And, even if they're coming into the Twin Cities or one of our markets on, say, Friday night at midnight, and they're like, oh, shoot, I got a place to find a place to put my truck. They can go on our website, enter their name, enter their information, choose the spot, and literally 5 minutes after they're on that site, that code will be working in the gate and they can come on in and park their vehicle. So
Wow.
we try to use technology as best we can. Obviously, our staff doesn't work at midnight on Fridays,
Yeah.
but yet our website's always working. So you can go on there, see our locations, even rent spot directly through our website, and also our phone numbers, email, everything is on the website. So you can reach out to us, let us know what you're looking for. We'd love to have your community tell us, where do we need to be looking to put new properties.
Wow.
We're constantly trying to grow and service this industry, and we're trying to figure out where is the biggest demand and where should we be, setting up that fight with the city to see if they'll let us come in. And we're looking for new locations. And certainly in our newest locations in St. Cloud, Minnesota, and Des Moines, Iowa, they have open space. We're still working on filling those properties. So if you're in those areas, we certainly give us a call. We'll take care of you. You're not going to find secure quality properties like we're offering in those areas, and it's just tough to get the word out. As tight knit as this community is, everybody's generally independent, and it's there's far more demand than we have space, but the vast majority of people don't even know we exist. So we're just trying to get the word out and letting people know that you have options.
Now, location. So I remember that.
Exactly. No, that's business, right? It's all
Yeah.
about where is the need, and of course, even if we determine a need is in one spot, it can take us 6 months to a year.
Wow.
Even if we know the perfect property and the person wants to sell it to us, it can still take us 6 months to a year to get the city approvals, get everything built out, add the electric, do all the infrastructure necessary to get that spot active.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I ran into you guys at the Iowa truck stop, and
Oh
that
yeah,
was,
yeah, the big event out there.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was huge. And I'm glad you guys came there. I mean, that's a good way to get exposure and let other people know that you're here, especially in the Midwest. I mean, that's awesome. I mean, there was a lot of truck drivers there with their beautiful trucks. I'm sure a lot of them want to put them somewhere at certain times. I'm sure they have something already, but you never know because you also do like campers and boats and things like that too, it looks like.
Yeah, 95% of our business our semi trucks. But yeah, we do still, especially we do have some smaller spots, in the corners of our properties, in those areas that won't necessarily accommodate a full semi. Then we'll utilize those smaller spots for, like you say, we generally say anything on wheels. Got a camper, boat, whatever it is you need to store. Certainly you can utilize our spaces, but most of our requirements, we don't want material on the ground. We're not a distribution center, so if it's on wheels, we'll see what we can do to accommodate you.
Perfect. Wow. Thank you so much, Mike, for joining us today and sharing those insights. I think a lot of us have got a bigger picture of what's going on. And also, like I said, the struggle continues to provide that service, but we champion you. We want you to be successful and we want to spread the word. So it's been a pleasure to be able to learn more about Stagecoach Storage and the important role it plays for truck drivers. For our listeners, if you want to learn more, they can also reach out to your website. I think it's beautifully laid out and very easy to navigate through. So that pretty much wraps it up for That's Delivered. Thank you for joining in. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, share it with your friends. And until next time, keep on trucking and stay safe out there. Appreciate you, Mike, and you have a great day.
Thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
All right.
Are you a trucker looking for a safe and reliable place to park? Look no further than Truck Parking Club. With locations across the country, we've got the perfect spot waiting for you, whether it's daily or long-term parking. And right now, use promo code DELIVERED at checkout for an exclusive discount. Reserve your spot today at truckparkingclub.com and drive stress-free, knowing your parking is covered.